The UK asylum system is set up to force people who are refused into destitution for them to make the decision to return.
A lot of people might imagine, quite naively perhaps, that if someone's asylum claim is turned down, that then the government would move to deport them. That isn't happening.
No. The asylum system and the asylum support system was the beginning of the hostile environment, and we're seeing this now in action where destitution is a policy tool of the UK government.
The Home Office maintains that once a claim is rejected, there's no legal basis for continuing support. Last year, just 26% of failed asylum seekers were returned to their country of origin.
Albeit the idea of lock changing, effectively rendering tenants destitute, admittedly can come across as a bit harsh or even humane, but people seem to be completely disregarding how it came to this point in the first place, as these people were given a 7-day notice, not to mention the fact they're failed asylum seekers. This isn't asylum seekers that have had their applications confirmed. They've decided to remain exactly where they are after having their claims rejected. So you have to ask yourself, when were these claims rejected? Was it a year ago? Was it 2 years ago? Whenever it was can be added to the 7-day notice that they've been given. Catholic human rights campaigners have written to the Archbishop of Glasgow asking for asylum seekers who've been rejected, affected by lock change evictions, to be temporarily housed in disused church property. Justice and Peace Scotland's Glasgow group, the Society of St Vincent de Paul, Glasgow, and Marianne Action have all responded to the news that Circle will change locks on behalf of the Home Office, who have begun evicting up to 30 people a week. Currently there is about 300 asylum seekers in the city, and the lock changes will effectively render many of them homeless. With the controversial lock changes titled the Move On Protocol by the Home Office, and aims to see those who have been refused asylum return to their countries, from which many asylum seekers claim to have fled due to factors such as war and persecution, but despite that they've had their claims rejected. See, there seems to be a focus on the actions that have been undertaken, but less of a focus on the fact that these people are still in the country long after the fact that they've had their claims rejected. Am I missing the point here or something? You know, these things wouldn't be occurring to these people if they had left the country. And as I said before, I'm surprised that actions haven't been undertaken long ago to make them vacate the country. Instead of that, they've been left to their own devices up until this point, which is questionable at best. The people currently threatened with eviction are seeking protection in the UK, having fled war and persecution in their home countries, supposedly, albeit they've had their claims rejected. Forcing already vulnerable people, supposedly, into destitution is inhumane. Mindful of our calling to welcome the stranger, we write to you to ask that those who are left homeless because of this be accommodated temporarily. It would appear the term temporarily is for as long as these people can make it. I mean, what are they hoping for? What is the end result of this? What comes after temporarily? If they've had their claims rejected, I would have thought there was nothing that could be done to reverse that process. The fact of the matter is they shouldn't be in the country, as sad as that may sound. And these inhumane actions that have been taken, quote unquote, wouldn't be occurring if they'd left the country when they had their claims rejected. So there is no temporarily in regards to it leading up to something. Dorothy McLean, chair of GMP Glasgow, said their motivation to help comes by the Gospel's message of Matthew 25 verse 5. I was a stranger and you made me welcome. She said on May the 27th this year, Pope Francis wrote in his message for the World Day of Migrants and Refugees. And I mean, again, what have the two got to do with each other? This is a constant attempt to conflate the two and make them one and the same. And then it always ends up that they take the plights of refugees and apply it to economic migrants. The response to the challenges posed by contemporary migration can be summed up in 4 verbs. Welcome, protect, promote and integrate. Is that so, Mr. Francis? In response, Archbishop Tartaglia has written to Home Secretary Priti Patel stating that the measure is regrettable and harsh, and it wouldn't have occurred and it wouldn't have had to have been this way if they'd left when they've had their claims rejected. He added, I appeal to you to not make refugees and failed asylum seekers homeless, but to provide for them decent accommodation in accordance with their human dignity and human rights. Let's just say that housing was granted to these failed asylum seekers. That sends a fantastic message to the wider world for people that wish to come over here and chance their arm with asylum claims. Because asylum seekers and failed asylum seekers are equally housed, are equally taken care of. Then what's the point of them being a failed asylum seeker? Kind of defeats the purpose in a sense. He called the evictions extremely distressing for failed asylum seekers, adding, many of the churches in Glasgow provide support and outreach to refugees and failed asylum seekers, or asylum seeker members of our communities, and our parishes are richer for the fucking diversity and experience they bring. Now we're talking about the arrival of refugees and asylum seekers as culturally enriching, celebrating the diversity that they supposedly bring along with them. Is that all that you can think about? Diversity and inclusion and so on, in regards to their arrival? Many of the asylum seekers living in Glasgow are devout Catholics. I find that very difficult to believe, considering it was only 2 paragraphs up that they were talking about the cultural enriching diversity and experience that they bring. You wouldn't need to talk about diversity and so on if they were Catholics. So it's either they have lied to you and said that they were Catholics, or you're lying yourself. Julia Rogers, Circle's managing director for immigration, stressed that they very much regret the distress the evictions will cause. The company has also made 150 grand available for homeless charities, and a spokesperson for the Home Office has said that the UK only ever returns those who both the Home Office and the courts are satisfied do not need our protection and have no legal basis to remain in the UK. Together with charities, we have engaged with every individual affected over a number of months to provide advice and guidance on the support available on the voluntary returns process. And yet, here we are, months later after they've had their claims rejected, and the first course of action that's been taken to prompt their exit has been met with activists and so on. Backlash, the proverbial backlash, as the lefties run rampant in